Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. My dad was a librarian, and so I grew up loving libraries and bookish stuff, so it's great to be here. If it's okay, I'll just read a couple of pages and then we'll do questions and answers. Does that suit the team? The surgeon held out a gloved hand, palm up, and said, "Scalpel." He made a smooth, long incision across my wife's belly, below the umbilicus and above the pubic hair. Sally's skin spread. The thin layer of fat glistened yellow, and small red dots appeared along the edges of the skin. One spot blossomed larger, and blood trickled into the incision. The surgical assistant touched the spot with the electric cautery pin, and a blue spark buzzed. A small puff of smoke rose into the cold, bright air, the incense of burned blood. The latex gloves were smeared with red, but not enough to make them slippery. The exact and silent movements of the surgeon and assistant became more urgent. They dissected and tugged, gripped and cut, down through the muscles of the abdominal wall, grasping, stretching, and digging quickly down to the hard purple muscle of the uterus. A pause followed. A pause followed by a low transverse cut and a gush of clear fluid that sloshed out across the table. The room quieted, save the slurping sound of the surgeon's hand plunging into the belly, up to the wrist. The surgeon groped round blindly, found the head, and then pulled upward, wrestling the baby out through the wound. Sally was in bed in the recovery room. I was standing next to her. They had taken the baby somewhere. Dr. Gage pulled the curtain open. The guides in the aluminum track above made a clicking, clattering sound. He had taken off his OR hat, and his forehead had a red arc across it. Dark sweat stains were under the arms of his green scrubs. "I just checked on the baby," he said. "Congratulations. She's beautiful. She seems healthy and had great APGAR scores." He paused. "She has 2 small heart murmurs, probably a small VSD and a patent ductus." Sally turned her head a few degrees to the side, keeping her eyes on Dr. Gage. "We'll get an ultrasound of the heart," he said. "Make sure." His voice was gentle and clear. "And?" Sally said. "She has Down syndrome." Sally shrieked. Fists at her side, neck veins bulging, she took a big gasp of air and screamed again. The wailing ricocheted off the walls and ceiling. My heart beat fast. I leaned down and placed my forehead next to hers, hairline to hairline. She continued wailing. I kept my head touching her head. Her screaming was full throttle. Her gasps for air became more frequent. I closed my eyes. A nurse brought the baby into the recovery room to feed. "Do you want to hold her?" the nurse said. I shook my head. Sally reached out. "Hello, Sarah." Sally's voice was musical and hoarse from the screaming. Sally hoisted the bottom edge of her gown and tucked it under her chin. Her breasts were swollen and heavy, with faint blue veins visible through the pale skin. "Let's see how we do," she said. The nurse watched as Sally grasped her breast. "Further back from the nipple," the nurse said. "Sarah needs to get a big mouthful." Sally held Sarah close and brushed the baby's cheek against her nipple. Sarah opened her mouth wide, like she was yawning, and Sally pulled her into her body. Sally smiled. "Like a pro," the nurse said. I let out a pent-up breath. Sally looked down at Sarah. In oil paintings of the Madonna and Child, the light is soft and the shadows softer, and breastfeeding looks peaceful and quiet. It is suffused by a radiant calm. But surrounded by the pastel stripes of this too bright cubicle, this meeting of saliva and skin, milk and tongue, was a slurping, grunting, air whistling through the nostrils affair. And there was a cold, bright light shining down on this baby. The program lasts like an hour and a half, so I was just going to read the whole time. Just, you know, I wanted to start the book with this scene because it was a dramatic scene. And I'm grateful to Sally for letting me write it and for letting me read it. With both books, I wanted to write books that were good books, and I wanted to stay married. And to write a book that's a good book, you just have to be relentlessly honest and clear. And you have to reveal things about yourself that you may not be that proud of, because otherwise the readers will know you're bullshitting them if all you show is your good side. I'm paraphrasing a teacher. She said you have to show the monster in the mirror. But anytime you shine a light on yourself, some's going to get off on the family too, right? So Sally was very brave, and we had a deal. I wanted to stay married. I wanted to write true stuff. We had a deal that I could write whatever I wanted without deleting anything. I would just write, just pure write what I had seen and felt without apologizing. And then Sally could delete whatever she wanted without explanation, without apology. Just put a red line through a baby, we'll just cut it out and keep moving forward. Then there won't be any of the, oh dear, that's so important, or I like that phrase. There won't be any of that stuff. It was just, she could delete whatever she wanted. But she didn't delete anything, which kind of scared me. But I'm grateful, Sally, for letting me read this stuff. So that's the beginning. The book shows me having a hard time seeing past Sarah's Down syndrome. I was in medical school at the time and was busy learning all the stuff you have to learn to be a doc, and I focused on that, and I think I was a relatively good dad, but I really had a hard time seeing past her diagnosis. And the book shows that. And then over time, I kind of see past the diagnosis and kind of see her for who she is as a charming, bright young woman. There's a thing about, you hear about people say, people with Down syndrome, they're so loving, right? And it's kind of a stereotype. It's nice. It's a nice thing to say. But then if your daughter is loving toward you, you wonder, is that just like slanted eyes? Is that just another manifestation of a chromosomal abnormality, or is it just she loves me in the same way that her brothers love me, right? And I kind of resisted that stereotype. I just don't believe in stereotypes in general about any group of people. And I think that it's a confusing thing. Let me read a piece when she and I are movie buddies, and Jen Wiegand and Sarah have the same birthday, and they're movie buddies and do Meals on Wheels together. Jen is a close friend, and we're movie buddies as couples, but she and Sarah are special movie buddies. And Sarah will call and say, hey, Jen, let's go see Frozen, right? Sarah's not bashful about picking up the phone and But Sarah and I are movie buddies too, and we're on our way to a movie when this story happened. And she's like, I don't know, 22. Sarah and I were in the car going out to dinner and a movie. While we were waiting for a traffic light to change, NPR began a segment on the R word, retarded. The speech was about a crusade to classify the word as hate speech and to replace it with the term intellectually disabled. A father of a girl with Down syndrome was being interviewed and told of the time he actually yelled at a person who would cut him off in traffic. And I said that word. And then I stopped the car and I got teary and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. Sarah, 22, was in the passenger seat, her pocketbook on the floor between her feet. Her lips moved as she had a silent conversation with herself. She didn't seem to hear the radio. Retarded. It's a word that'll get the hackles up. Of course, it's better than idiot, moron, imbecile, and feeble-minded, all of which were coined as medical terms, technical terms, each one designating a specific IQ range. Over time, popular culture co-opted the words until the Three Stooges used them as often as eye pokes and dope slaps. The National Down Syndrome Society prefers intellectual disability over mental retardation, and I've heard parents of persons with Down syndrome use the term developmentally delayed, a term I've used in the past. It seems, though, that even the most carefully formulated nomenclature will eventually become corrupted. The term special has been turned into a sing-song taunt on schoolyard playgrounds. I wonder how long it will take for intellectual disability to sound as antiquated and pejorative as feeble-minded. And there's a white space break here. They don't know how it feels, Sam said one day after school. That's Sarah's little brother. He was 12. A quick and physical kid, Sam would rather jump than worry about where he was going to land. One of his buddies had been imitating a retard while everybody else laughed. I wanted to punch him, Sam said. He sat forward, his face set, his eyes glistening with tears. They've got no idea what it's like. Sally was proud that he didn't hit the kid. I was proud that he wanted to. It's funny, Sarah's group home came to one of the readings, and every couple of months, it turns out, I go to the group homes and fix dinner, like ribs or chili, some guy food, and we have dinner together. And so I went over there and took some food, and I gave some readings to make sure I wouldn't disrespect them with what I read, right, or hurt their feelings. And when I got to that part, I was proud he wanted to. Everybody around the table nodded. They were proud too. Sam is in the 82nd Airborne, which is scary for dads and moms, but that's beside the point. Okay, we're getting back to work here. I'm sorry. The Cars Radio continued with the story of the dad who had yelled the R word and subsequently started an anti-R word campaign. He wanted to have the word retarded bleeped from radio shows and television shows. He'd written letters to every commissioner of the FCC, to the President of the United States, and even Oprah. I wondered if he hadn't taken it a bit far. I mean, he had himself used the word with his intellectually disabled daughter sitting right beside him. It's not a word I've used in traffic. I've muttered asshole when another driver has cut me off. There are lots of other words I'm not proud of using. On the occasion that Sarah has heard me curse, she laughed loudly and said, "Busted," smacking the palm of her hand against her thigh, turning to see if anyone else had witnessed her catching me using crude language. The word retarded blurted out on the radio speakers a few more times. I glanced over at Sarah. She appeared oblivious. "What do you think?" I asked her. She startled. "What? What do you think about this?" I pointed toward the radio. I wasn't listening. "It's about the word retarded." "Oh." She looked at the car's radio and didn't say anything. "Does it bother you?" I asked. "It depends," she said, her voice matter of fact. "If a staff member uses the term, it's one thing." She turned towards me and frowned. "But if someone says, 'You retard,' that's different." Her voice sounded so scornful when she said, "You retard." "Fair enough," I said. The car behind me honked. I glanced at the traffic light. It was green. We drove a few more blocks without talking. I was proud that Sarah could tease out the nuances of language, but I wondered if something so hurtful could really be so cut and dried. "It's a stereotype," she said at the next traffic light, "and it's mean." I'm so proud of Sarah for being so clear. I wrote the book because I wanted to write a second book and didn't have any other good stories. I mean, I wasn't on any big crusade when I wrote this book, right? I mean, I just wanted to write a book, and this was the best thing I had. And I wanted to capture kind of what it had seemed like to me And in doing so, I wanted to capture Sarah. And in doing so, I got to know her better. So I'm grateful for all my writing teachers and grateful for the chance to write this book. Thank you guys for showing up. But the book helped me to see Sarah more clearly. Another quick story. I don't know, I know people's butts get sore, and most of these times I'm skipping stuff in the interest of keeping it from being too painful out there. And let me read this one more quick thing and then do questions and answers, and maybe bust out early. And okay. Sarah leaned toward me, pulling the car door shut. "I know you don't like musicals," she said as she twisted around to grab her shoulder belt. "That's why I suggested a romantic comedy. We had just seen a movie about a bounty hunter taking his ex-wife back to jail." "Good call," I said. I put the key in the ignition. "But I like just about everything else except horror." We went to the movies every couple of months, and so Sarah picked out the movie, and I drove. "I like comedy," she said. "I like dramas. I like romance. I like romantic comedies, action, Disney, suspense, and musicals." She took a deep breath. "I like them all." At the climax of the movie we just watched, the heroine, a lithe young journalist in a close-fitting turtleneck, racked a shell into a shotgun and fired a warning shot over the villain's head. Her recently reconciled husband then punched the guy right in the nuts. This movie had something for everybody. "You're a good movie buddy," I said. "John, 19, and Sam, 16, would sometimes watch a TV show with me, but they'd never go to the movies with me." "Yup." Sarah gripped her lower lip between her teeth and buckled her seatbelt. We always stopped at the concession stand, and Sarah always got a small combo: Diet Coke and popcorn. In the theater, she sat patiently with the popcorn bag on her lap. She didn't eat a kernel, didn't take a sip until the movie began. Not the trailers, not the title. She waited for the movie itself. I was often surprised at how much I enjoyed the movies that Sarah chose. Some of the detective buddy films she picked out I would have otherwise skipped. And some of the screwball comedies reached for laughs that were too predictable. But the movie itself didn't matter so much as sitting in the dark beside my daughter and hearing her laugh without restraint. If her laughter was sometimes too loud or sounded forced or was a little off key or lagged behind everyone else's, who cares? When I glanced over, Sarah's face would be lit from the screen and fully engaged in the movie. We gave each other a little fist bump when we saw a trailer that we were both interested in. We usually went out for supper beforehand, and Sarah told me about her job bagging groceries at Harris Teeter and about the residents and staff at the group home. Sarah's stories were intricate and full of energy and emotion. Customers who got impatient at the grocery store and who told her to hurry up bagging the groceries. "It's like the time I was a kid and crying at a Winnie the Pooh movie," Sarah said. We were at a traffic light on the way home from the romantic comedy about the bounty hunter and his bail-jumping ex-wife. I glanced at her and then back at the red traffic light. "You cried at a Winnie the Pooh movie?" "They were throwing popcorn at me." "Who?" "The other kids. They laughed at me, called me retard." "During a Winnie the Pooh movie?" The light turned green and I pulled away from the intersection. "When was this?" "At a party," she said. "A birthday party." "Your birthday?" I couldn't remember a time we'd taken her to a Winnie the Pooh movie party, but working rotating shifts, I missed out on a lot of my family's life. "No," she said. "A different kid's birthday." "That's too bad," I said. "I always liked Winnie the Pooh." As a child, I sat for hours leafing through the book, staring at the pen and ink drawings of Pooh clutching a honey jar at the door of the base of the tree, Pooh and Piglet leaving footprints in the snow, Pooh stuck halfway in and halfway out a rabbit hole. "Not me," Sarah said. The needle of my gas gauge crossed in the red zone, and I pulled into a mini-mart. "Need gas," I said. I like all kinds of movies, Sarah said, her voice rising. Action movies, drama movies, romantic comedies, Disney movies, musicals, even horror movies. Her tone had become adamant and angry. She leaned toward me, speaking slowly and distinctly. She enunciated every word for emphasis. But I don't like Winnie the Pooh. I had my door open and was about to step outside. It isn't just the popcorn either, she said, leaning back and folding her arms over her chest. I waited for her to go on. Go ahead, she said. Pump your gas. Won't take but a sec. She shrugged her shoulders, her arms still locked over each other. I pulled in the driveway of her group home. Winnie the Pooh doesn't understand anything that's going on around him, she said, and all he cares about is honey. It's his whole life, she snorted. Honey. She unbuckled her seatbelt. He's always having problems, even with simple things. She looked me in the face. Think about it. He's a perfect symbol for people with special needs. She leaned forward and snatched her pocketbook from the floor, and everybody laughs at him. She stepped out of the car. Holding the door open, she said, That's why I don't like Winnie the Pooh. She heaved the door shut with a satisfying thwack and trudged up the hill towards her group home. She took short steps, her arms swinging side to side. I pushed a button, and my window slid down silently. Thanks for going to the movie with me, I called out. I couldn't tell if she was mad at me or hurt by Winnie the Pooh or satisfied that she had finally articulated something about a movie that had been bugging her since elementary school. I had a great time, I called out. She turned and waved, her palm towards me, fingers wide. The car's headlights made a blonde nimbus of her hair. Me too, she called back, smiling. Apparently, she wasn't mad at anybody. Then she was digging in her pocketbook, looking for the key to the side door. So, I didn't know if Sarah would ever read this book, and I did not give Sarah red line privilege, right? I gave Sally red line privilege. I did not give Sarah red line privilege. And you can make an argument that that's a double standard, and that showed an ethical failure on my part. You can also make the argument that Sarah couldn't sign for her own appendectomy either. I mean, we'd sign for that. I did want her to read it, though, before it came out, or at least have the chance to, right, to respond to it somehow. She reads she reads well, very literal about everything she reads. And abstraction is not her strong point, which is the point that John Locke makes about people with intellectual disabilities, and I engage Locke and a couple other philosophers about some of the things they say about people with intellectual disabilities in the book. But I wanted Sarah to have a chance to read it. So when it looked like it was going to go, when it was final, it turns out there's a lot of writing to be done on the book and a lot of revision, like major revisions. But when we get down to copy editing, proofreading, and final, I went up to Kinko's and had it printed and spiral bound and gave it to Sarah. She was on the front porch. She swings obsessively a lot. She loves to swing. And she was on the front porch swinging. People that know her are nodding, right? And there's always this battle that she's had some hearing loss, and she likes her music loud, and she sings loud, and the louder her music is, the louder she sings, and the more often people will stop and look. They'll be walking down the street going, and you'll see them ask each other. Yeah, she swings outrageously high, too. Way higher than you should on like a front porch swing, and there's no point in trying to make her stop. But you'll see them talk to each other. Should we knock on the door? I mean, do they know she's... Anyway, she was swinging. And so I said, Sarah. She took her headphones up. I said, this is the book about you and Down syndrome and me and everything, and if you want to read it, you're welcome. You don't have to read it, but if you want to read it, you can. And I left it on a little table on the front porch. Christmas holidays. She kept swinging. A day or two later, I was getting coffee for me and Sally. I was off duty for several days and making coffee. Sarah comes in. And I said, "Good morning, favorite daughter." And she would always say, "But I'm your only daughter." And then I'd say, "Yeah, but you're my favorite daughter." And she'd say, "But I'm your only daughter." I'd say, "Yeah, but you're still my favorite." And it'd go back and forth. And it never gets tiring to me and Sarah. And other people just... This time I said, "Good morning, favorite daughter." She just looks at me, reaches in and gets the milk. I said, "Good morning, favorite daughter." She goes, "It's not that funny, Dad." Gets some cereal. Gets her bowl. I said, "Sarah, you always grumpy in the morning? Because as I remembered, you were pretty happy in the morning." "I read your book last night." "Oh, what do you think?" "It's long." I said, "Yeah." "You don't think I'm human?" I said, "What?" "That's what your book said." I said, No, sweetheart, no. That's not at all what my book said. If that's how you read it, either you need to read it again or I need to write it again. That's a failure of communication. I don't think you're less than human at all. It's what your book said. I said, "No, that was John Locke, Sarah." And he didn't directly say that people with disabilities are less than human. He just drew a distinction between beasts and animals. And he didn't explicitly say people with disabilities are less than human, but he kind of implied it. But I don't think that. What your book said. "Was Mommy smoking when I was born?" I said, "What?" Nah, Sarah, she never did smoke. Your book said she was smoking." I said, "Oh, no, that was an electric cautery pen. Not like the little bleeder, right? When they were cutting down through the belly, they buzz it with this little hot thing to keep it from bleeding. And a little smoke." "Oh. You can go now, Dad." She's quick to dismiss you. When she started talking to you, she'll say, "You can go now, Dad." So I took our coffee in and said, "Sarah read the book last night." So I goes, "You think she read the whole thing?" I said, "I don't know. She said she did, I guess. I mean, she asked questions about different parts of the book that made me think she probably read it. Do you think she understood it?" I don't know. I didn't understand parts of it. I don't know. She came in, and sometimes I use bad words in my regular conversation. So someone will raise their eyebrow. "Really? That's shocking, Paul. Shocking." So there's a bad word here that if you guys get offended, I'm sorry, but it's a bad word. Good old Anglo-Saxon bad word. But it's necessary for this story. So Sarah comes in, lays between me and Sally, turns her back to me, facing Sally. Try the same gambit. "Good morning, favorite daughter." Sally said, "Sarah, your father said good morning." She goes, "Morning." I said, "Sarah, did my book hurt your feelings? Did my book disrespect you?" "I am sorry. I can see how it would. Parts of the book are hard. Parts of the book were hard for me to write. And I'm sure parts of the book were hard for you to read. But I did not want to hurt you, and I did not want to disrespect you. And I tried real hard not to. But you don't think I'm human?" I said, No, Sarah, that was John Locke, okay? A guy, he's dead now. I forget what year he was in. It was like Revolutionary War times or something. And big philosopher, famous guy, but I really disagree with him. "It's not what your book said." I said, "I don't know, Sarah. This is what my book said." "Sarah, do you know the F word?" She turns to me and goes, "You mean fuck?" I said, Yeah, in my book, I said, "Fuck John Locke. That's how much I disagree with those people." "Oh." And I think once she got that she heard Dad use that word about that idea, she got it, that I was on her side. She goes, "Do you think they'll make a movie?" I said, "I don't know, Sarah. If they do, who's gonna play you?" "I'll play me. Johnny Depp can play you." I said, so who's going to play Mommy? She can play herself. "So you're going to have Johnny Depp kissing my wife?" She goes, "No, Dad. in the movies they kiss like this, and she covered my mouth with her palm, and so that's kind of how the book ends, with her covering my mouth and then giving me a kiss. So that's my song and dance. Any questions? Yes. Sarah is 27. Yeah, husbands never know. The dads never know. They look to the wife. 20s, and Sally goes, 7? No, 27. And lives in a group home at RSI, Residential Services Incorporated, in Chapel Hill, a nonprofit that was started by parents of persons with disabilities, some faculty at UNC, and some community helpful people. Anyway, it started off grassroots, and it's so very lucky that she's in that group home, because it's very mission-driven group of people, and Sarah's flourishing. 07. She moved out her senior year in high school, and that's in the book. And that was, there's a lot about this that was, for me, confusing and challenging and painful. But when Sally and I were dating, I was a nursing assistant at UNC Hospital, Chapel Hill, and 20 hours a week, and living in a trailer. Money was tight, and Sally was a nurse. She had money, but we tended to go on cheap dates, and we went to a movie on campus in the student union called Best Boy, about a man who was in his 50s. His parents were in their 80s, and he had intellectual disability and lived at home. And his parents were thinking about retirement centers and eventually dying and what's going to happen to him. And so he had to learn to navigate the outside world. And the hell are we doing that for a date night? That's just how broke I was, right? I mean, Sally one time took me to Heckinger's, or like it wasn't Heckinger's? Home Depot as a date night. She's great. But that movie stuck with us. And when Sarah was born, we decided early on to help her break out of the family as her future siblings would. And actually, Sam, right out of high school, joined the Army. John was took a while to launch him. He was a harder launch than Sarah. But they're gone, thanks be to God. And we miss them. And they're all doing well in their own way. She got her verbalness from her mom in terms of talking incessantly. And no, I was kidding. Help me out, Sally. She was all of her milestones were delayed, and it turns out acquisition of spoken speech is accelerated by learning sign language. And I was against it because I was afraid it would make her look deaf. And Sally was for it, was because it would help them communicate. But Sarah learned to sign. And this is a sign for sit. And this is a sign for no. So you can tell what Daddy knew in restaurants. Yeah, and more. And I'm sorry. Contrition. I learned contrition early on. But the whole family learned some sign language to help Sarah acquire language. That was when we were in Pittsburgh. That was probably in second year, so she was how old? 2. Right, and she's got a great vocabulary, and she's funny. Like, I came home from work one day, they just got beat to pieces. I work in an emergency room, right, and it can be stressful, and I just got beat down. And I was walking the front porch, walking in the front door, and said, Sarah, I had a terrible day. She smacked me on the shoulder. Not me, Dad, and kept walking, right? Another time I'd gotten angry on the phone with my brother and my mom. There's a big drama in High Point, and I left the house and walked up and down the sidewalk, up and down the street to calm down. I came walking back inside, and Sarah looks at me and goes, "No problems here, Dad," and kept going. I mean, she's just funny. When my editor wanted more happy stories for the book, Sarah had been saying that she thought there should be happy stories and romance and not so much about Down syndrome in the book. She'd been pushing that ever since I started writing it. And we were on our way to a movie, and I said, Sarah, I flew all the way to New York to talk to my editor, and she just told me the same thing you told me here back in Durham, that it needs more happy stories. And she goes, "Ha! Told you, Dad." I said, "What? I'm having a hard time thinking of any. Can you think of some?" "Not really, Dad. You were always at work, and Mom was always stressed." I said, "Well, I can't get my money until I turn in my book. So I need some happy stories." She goes, "Good luck with that, Dad." I mean, she's real straight ahead and clear.
We're doing sign language, and we're saying single words, but we're 6 years old. It's really slow.
It's challenging. It's so hard.
Is it going to come?
Yeah. And so you have a family member?
I have a 6-year-old grandson.
Okay.
Totally unexpected.
Right.
He literally fell out in the lobby.
Wow. Sense of drama, I'd say. But
OT, PT, he's being mainstream in kindergarten.
good. That I am trying to avoid any giving advice. This is like a global epiphany. And also, I'm not sure that my story would be that useful, but there is an impulse to turn your child into a project. And I think I did that to my detriment and maybe to Sarah's detriment. I don't know. What the hell? I just did the best I could. And I'm sure you're doing the best you can, and your grandchild's parents are doing the best they can. But I think giving yourself a break would be job one. And marriage counseling is a good idea. Our OB doc, I didn't read that part, said he wanted us to remember 3 things. It's nothing you did or you didn't do. Sarah's going to be more like other children than unlike other children. And see a marriage counselor. That every baby brings up new problems that you didn't exist before, right? And a lot of couples have trouble navigating that transition, and particularly parents of children with special needs. And I thought that was brilliant. We had the best OB doc in the world in terms of breaking the news, because it was unexpected for us too. And that advice served us well. And so I think couples counseling can make sure you're both kind of not losing your mind. And remember, the child will be more like other children than unlike, but not turn the child into a pathology, not turn the child into a project. Just, there's an impulse to try to broaden the child's horizons with OT, PT, speech therapy. God, it just goes on. All these abbreviations like IEPs and EGDs, and God, I had a hard time keeping track of it. But there's going to be a whole army of people helping this child broaden his or her, is it a boy or girl? The boy, helping this little boy have as broad a future as possible. But I think I wish I'd go back and tell myself to take a deep breath and to love and accept Sarah as she was. I was so busy trying to make her better that I robbed myself of some joy. And most writers will tell you, I'm ashamed of myself for looking at my Amazon comments, but I can't help myself, so I check my Amazon standing in my comments. It's just a neurotic thing that writers do. And there's several people who've said that they wish I'd been more tender. Well, yeah, me too. What the hell am I gonna do? But I wish I'd been more tender with myself and more tender. I wish I'd been able to love Sarah as the perfect young child she was, because I did not see her perfection. I saw her imperfections. I also did that with my sons, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that's true. thank you for interrupting. But yeah, I think we all, um, with any kid, but with a child with special needs, it just makes it easier to focus on that, or makes it easier to see that in yourself. But if I look back on the way I think about John and Sam, I've done the same things to them, and I'm not unique in that. My family kind of blew out from under me when I was in high school, so they're just kind of love them all those things. But my dad's response was interesting. He was born with a congenital anomaly that involved strands of cartilage in utero encircling fingers and toes in an inelastic fashion such that they got pinched off by the time he was born. If it had been around his neck, he wouldn't have survived. So I grew up, my dad had like one big finger and a thumb on each hand and no toes on one foot. And I grew up thinking that was what Daddy's hands looked like. And the kid down the street, Stevie Pidge, his dad had all these fingers, man. Just something wrong with his hands. I couldn't figure it out. And I knew better than it's there, but I kind of look and try, what's wrong with that Stevie Pieces Daddy's hands? Because there's something wrong with him. And I kept looking, and I finally figured out he had too many fingers. And so next time his daddy wasn't around, I said, Stevie, your daddy has too many fingers. He goes, what? I said, I'm just saying he's got too many fingers. He goes, he's got 10 fingers. I said, I know. Yeah, that's what and so he said, well, he's supposed to. I said, no, he's not. Daddies have a finger and a thumb. And he goes, well, your daddy's wrong. I said, no, your daddy's wrong. And so when I asked him, when I asked my dad, I said, Dad, look, are you or Stevie Pieces' dad's right? He said, about what? I said, about the fingers. He said, what are you talking about? I explained. He goes, oh, I see. Nah, yeah, most dads have 10 fingers. Like, it's not wrong to have one finger and thumb on each hand, but you should know that most dads have 10 fingers. So I wasn't sure, but I'd live with it. So when Sarah was born, I was just, Sally knew how to respond emotionally. I don't know if that came across in the book. I didn't know what to think or feel. I was just, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And at that point in my life, doing something was more important to me than feeling it, right? Well, I didn't know how to do either one. I was talking to my dad, and he goes, you know, Paul, when I was a kid, my mom would always say, why did this happen to me? In reference to his hands. And I finally said, damn it, Mom, it didn't happen to you, it happened to me. So it was something that happened to Sarah more than me, right? But it was like kind of shut down getting any kind of support from him because it turned it into me being like his mom. But yeah, it's hard when your family. My family was kind of indifferent. Her family was real supportive, and Aunt Susan, they were favorites with each other. Aunt Susan and Sarah, and Aunt Susan one time noticed Sarah looking coy, and she goes, "Look at Sarah being coy," and Sarah goes, and so that the be coy got to be a family game that Aunt Susan taught her. But any other questions? High school was she went to Durham Public Schools, did okay. She was in the like mid-range special needs class with some mainstreaming for like art and non-academics. She was in a special needs class for like math and reading and science and stuff. Sarah has accepted her life with a lot more aplomb than I have. Like even in elementary school, I was with her, went to go see her teacher about something, and walking down the hallway, hey, Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Hey, it was like I was with a celebrity, and she wasn't disrespecting anybody. She'd nod and wave, but she wasn't going to slow down. I mean, these were just almost not fans exactly, but she kind of accepted her role. And she's very social and she's funny and verbal. But one time we were at Outback. Outback has a gluten-free menu, it turns out, and Sarah has celiac disease, which is associated with Down syndrome. And they have this chocolate Thunder Down Under, which is wheat-free, and it's delicious. And so we were there, and something came up, and she goes, "It's hard, Dad." I said, "What?" "Having Down syndrome, it's hard." And she's so bright and so effervescent. Am I overstating it? I'm looking for feedback. But but sometimes it didn't register to me how much effort she puts in to just getting through the day. I think there's a tendency for many of us to kind of see them as happy-go-lucky, carefree people that no care in the world, but just the tying the shoes and getting the clothes on and getting a dab of something on it and having to clean it, and your mom bugging you about your hair, and it just and not understanding stuff. She understands emotional stuff pretty quickly. Like, not to overshare about my mom, but my daughter has a much higher emotional IQ than my mom. I mean, she gets shit a lot quicker than my mom. You have to explain things pretty, and that's been true ever since I was a kid in terms of like a. So Sarah has a really quick emotional IQ, but there's a lot of stuff she just cognitively doesn't get, and so it must be hard to live in a world where everybody else gets stuff and you don't. Okay, here we go. It's I'll skip parts, so it goes like 6 minutes, but I'll skip some stuff. Walking past Sarah's bedroom, I noticed her sitting alone. She was 19. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her legs dangled off the edge of her bed. She wore black canvas Mary Jane shoes. No music was playing, and no books were spread out on the bed. No crayons were scattered around. She was staring at a chest of drawers with a beveled oval mirror in a matching mahogany frame. "You okay?" I asked, pausing at the doorway. She looked up at me. "I guess so." She turned to look at the chest of drawers again. As far as I knew, the morning had been good. I hadn't had to ask Sarah to turn her music down. I hadn't heard her yelling at Sally as she brushed the tangles out of her hair. No fussing about brushing her teeth. "What is it?" I asked. "I've got a question." She looked me in the face. "Okay." I stepped in the room. "Shoot." I loved answering questions, knowing stuff, explaining things. "When will I get over Down syndrome?" I sat in the chair next to her bed. It was a rocking chair with curved oak slats. Sarah's head was tilted to the side. Her tone sounded speculative. Maybe it was a rhetorical question, a conversational gambit. "When you'll get over Down syndrome?" I asked. I rocked slightly backward and forward. "Yeah," she said. She looked me in the eyes. "When?" I sat still and gathered my thoughts. Her Down syndrome notwithstanding, Sarah was bright, and she read facial expressions well. She had a surprisingly good vocabulary. But her thinking was concrete, and she didn't like it when someone beat around the bush. She waited. "It's not something you get over," I finally said. "It's not like a cold or a cough or a heart attack." Sally and I had always thought it important not to be bashful about Down syndrome. It was a medical fact. No cause for shame or squeamishness. Once, when Sarah was 10, I'd asked her what she thought having Down syndrome meant. "It means I have to try harder." I liked that definition. It was pragmatic, and it dodged the pitfalls of seeing Down syndrome as good or bad, as a blessing or a curse. It was something Sarah had, not who she was. Making this distinction did not feel like fudging. Most of us would acknowledge that our bodies give form to who we are. Male or female, short or tall, skinny or fat, descended from Africans, Asians, or Europeans. But our genes don't make us who we are. We define ourselves by the decisions we make. And every day, each of us bump up against our limitations. Same with Sarah. I just didn't know how to articulate all this in terms that she'd grasp. Her strengths were in the specific and physical, not the abstract. And anything I said could sound glib and unearned. I had no idea what it was like to live in Sarah's skin. I had never had to struggle so hard to do the things that come so easily to others. And anyway, that hadn't been her question. Sarah stared at me, didn't blink. "You know how Mommy has curly hair and you have straight hair?" "Yeah." "It's because of her genes." I said. Not genes, genes. I pinched the denim of my pants leg and gave it a tug. Genes like in chromosomes. I paused. The genes in Mommy's cells give her curly hair and gray eyes, and the genes in your cells give you blonde hair and hazel eyes. She stared at me. Genes also give you Down syndrome, I continued. Sarah knew the term trisomy 21 and that it involved chromosomes, genes. Yeah, I know, she said, but when will I get over it? Her face was motionless. Sometimes I wish that she was just a few degrees more intellectually disabled or a few degrees less. Down syndrome isn't something that goes away, I said. It's something you'll have forever, like blonde hair and hazel eyes. She nodded slightly as if to herself and looked down at her hands. I'm tired of it. Her shoulders slumped. Her hair fell down on either side of her face. I know you are, I said. Me too. Her face remained hidden behind the curtains of her hair, and I didn't know what she was thinking or feeling. I wondered if me saying me too had been a mistake. I wanted her to know that she wasn't alone and that her feelings were valid. Maybe I should give her a pep talk instead. Tell her how Down syndrome really wasn't that bad, that she could think of herself as alternatively enabled. Make my voice sound upbeat. But if I had, she would have looked at me and shook her head, wondering where I'd come up with such Susie Sunshine horseshit. I wanted so much for her to feel better, not hurt. I got out of the chair and sat next to her on the edge of the bed. Your mom and I love you. I put my arm around her shoulder. We believe in you. I felt false, like I was reciting lines in a play. But the fact was, we did love her and believed in her. I squeezed her shoulder. You got that, right? She leaned forward to make eye contact. I leaned forward to make eye contact. Straight hair or curly hair, gray eyes or hazel, we love you. We're proud of you, whether you have Down syndrome or not. She shrugged her shoulder and twisted her body away. I took my hand from her shoulder. You can go now. She's regal if nothing else, right? You may leave. No. You can go now. She didn't look up. I didn't know if she was reassuring me that she was okay or if she was dismissing me. Do you want me to go? Yes, she said. Please. If I were a better dad, I might have said, you're perfect the way you are. Isn't that what each of us longs to hear? But after all of the early intervention, the sign language, the walker, the occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech therapist, the small army of people who had helped Sally and me prepare Sarah for as broad a future as possible, the words would have sounded false, at least to me, probably to her too. But each and every one of us has something about ourselves we'd like to change. We may be too quick to anger, unmotivated, lazy, too ambitious. Our asses may sag and our bellies may have stretch marks. No such thing as an unflawed human. Please, she repeated, stressing the word. I stood and walked to the door. I wanted to tell her I admired... these emotions are just so hard to predict, right? I mean, the responses anyway. She want me to leave. I stood and walked to the door. I wanted to tell her I admired her courage. But she had asked me twice to leave. I paused at the door. I think you're great, I said, just like you are. There, I'd finally found the right words. The pressure that had been building in my chest began to dissipate. Please, Dad, my daughter told me, just go. So, one time, Sarah's middle brother raced her and won. She goes, yeah, but I got Down syndrome. So you can make the argument that John's place in the family was a tougher place than hers. Because if you compete with your older sister and lose, you lose to someone who's mentally retarded. And if you win, well, yeah, duh. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So the whole constellation in the family got. And that's one thing that we succeeded, I hope, in not making it a Down syndrome-centric family. We didn't make the whole family revolve around Sarah. And we tried not to make the whole family revolve around my schedule. I work rotating shifts. And if it was up to me, it would be Paul World. And everybody would adjust to me. And I would come home and, dear, how's your shift? You know, I'd say I'd get off at 2 o'clock in the morning, get home at 3, for Sally to wake herself up and, yeah, right. Yeah, that's going to happen. But, you know, yeah, I think all of us would like the world to revolve around us. At least I would. And but that's not right for the family. And so we tried to make the family not revolve around me or my schedule, or revolve around Sarah's special needs or her brothers. Just to make it a solar system where the family itself was the unit, and no one person was in the middle of it. But it turns out that Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, some of you guys have heard this, I'm sorry, they had a daughter with Down syndrome. And Dale Evans wrote a book, Angel Unaware. And she was the first celebrity to come out of the closet of having a kid with special needs. This was back in the day when people with disabilities were considered to be signs of, say again? Not human, yeah. And also it was signs of bad bloodline in one of the parents, either slothfulness or drunkenness or pauperism. This is when eugenics was still considered a science rather than just racist pseudoscience. But they kept the child, which was not done in the day. And she wrote a book, Angel Unaware, and sold a bunch of copies and donated the money to a group of people who became the Association of Retarded Citizens, which was the first advocacy group of people with special needs. And they changed the name to ARC when the word retarded got to be a disparative term. Anyway, that's in this book. And I read up on Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Dale Evans ran away from home at 15 to get married, had a baby, got divorced by 16. Roy Rogers was like her third or fourth husband. She was a wide open, wild little child. Very different from the Dale Evans we all knew and lusted after back in the day. Roy Rogers grew up on a one-room raft on the Ohio River in Portsmouth, Ohio. His dad had been a carnival worker or something. I couldn't find the history on it. And his mom had polio, walked with braces. So it occurred to me their lives were much more interesting than their movies. And I'm writing a novel based on all that. So once poets started writing memoir, the writing bar was raised because those guys just write so well. But those guys will bullshit anything. And no disrespect to poets in the crowd. So there's a journalistic branch, like guys like Ted Conover, Susan Orlean, who write literary nonfiction, and they see it as reporting. If it's in quotes, it's notes they took, and it's no shit what the person said. Recreated dialogue, they don't think is fair. They think if you put it in quotes, so they don't believe in reconstituted dialogue. On the other end of the spectrum are people that feel, well, if you kind of are try to get to the emotional core, emotional truth of it, that's close enough. And if you kind of have to like make up some characters and make up some dialogue, if that really gets to the heart of it. Like I read Michael Doty, D-O-T-Y, poet, good guy, real good guy, was trying to remember somebody's wedding dress. Was it ivory or was it white? Obviously the whole thing about, do I have the right to wear white? And I'm thinking, why didn't you just ask somebody, right? He thought that it was more interesting to have his internal angst about it than just to ask. So he's on kind of the poet end of it. And I'm kind of in the middle of it, that most of what I write is stuff that was just so not painful. So, like when Sarah said, when will I get over Down syndrome? It's like, you know, that rocked me back pretty hard so I can remember it. Most of us remember like 9/11, what we were doing when we first saw the TV show. So I try to stick to those moments, partly because I could remember them, but also they were the most interesting, right? So, but I really did try to keep it as nonfiction as possible and ask Sally and kind of fact-checked it that way. Was there anything that could have accelerated my acceptance of Sarah as she was? Could I have done anything different to have figured out before she was in her early 20s that she had nothing to apologize for, and I had nothing to apologize for. I felt hugely guilty. I felt that there was some inner flaw in me that was made manifest. And I think that's not something a lot of folks would fess up to, but I think it may be that I'm not unique in that. And again, maybe with all our kids, like all of us, every time our kid does something really stupid, we think about how it reflects on us. I think I just had to grow through it. Yeah, Triangle Down Syndrome Network was in Chapel Hill, and I remember driving home with Sally the first day. He said, "God, those people seem like regular people. You know, they were bright. Some of them were funny. Some of them were really hot. I mean, it was great. And I just like, and I thought they would all be just, I don't know what I thought. You know, like, I thought losers had kids with special needs, is what I thought, if I'm honest. And so now I was with a bunch of losers, right? But then I go to this support group, and they were just nice, funny people, bright, quick. And so I felt I really felt marked by God's thumbprint on my forehead. And then I see everybody else, and they seemed like regular old people. And that was very, very helpful. It was. One of the families had taken their kid, I think they were in Burlington, grocery store or something. And as a lot of people here probably know, people with Down syndrome have epicanthal folds that make their eyes a little bit slant, a little kind of oriental. And this old guy in bib overalls leaned over. Isn't he cute? You know, welcome to America, little feller. You're going to like it here. Yeah. See, I heard that story. That's a great story. I mean, where else could you hear that story? First off, we put her on a waiting list when she was like 5 years old. We found out about Residential Services Incorporated, and it turns out they're a model that other people from around the country come and see how they do things in terms of how well they provide for needs for people with special needs. And we found out that if you got to the top of the waiting list, if you weren't ready to go there, you just kind of bump along the top, right? They wouldn't put you back at the bottom. So there was no opportunity cost. There was no reason not to. So hell, we just put her name on the list when she was still in elementary school. We started Life Plan Trust early because I was afraid that we'd both die and there no one would be after look after Sarah, and didn't want to burden her brothers with it. And also, you're not sure the brothers would be capable. You know, if Sam stays in the Army, he could be in God knows where, he'd be deployed or just somewhere else. And so I felt very strongly an unending burden that I was going to face with. I was going to have to look after Sarah the rest of my life, never free of it. And I may be exaggerating some, but probably not much. Anyway, so we got her enrolled, got her name on the list, and got this Life Plan Trust. So when we die, money gets moved over to a group of people who will kind of look after her, along with her brothers, kind of helping drive the boat. What's that? Life Goes On. What was that kid's name? That guy's name? Corky. Corky's dad was great. Man, I'm not. You know, I'm just not. And the things I've just blundered through things, and the book shows that. But if I look at the way John and Sam and Sarah turned out, either they're real resilient, and Sally did a great job, and I must have done something right, or not too bad, that they're loving, respectful young men and women of each other. It's mutual. Well, let's quit. Unless anybody has any. I'm sorry. Well, that was the last question. No, if there's any more burning questions, fine. Otherwise, let's bounce. Good. Thank you.